My name is Brenden. I'm the data manager in the CU Online and Academic Technology Division of the University of Colorado, Denver. And I started in this role about a year and a half ago. And I have a pretty broad set of responsibilities, kind of a mile wide and an inch deep. And one of those is to explore Canvas data and see what kind of value we can get from it. And so I was really excited when I started here a year and a half ago to see that we had this really robust and rich set of data that Instructure had structured pretty nicely, put into a nice data warehouse for us. And so I started talking to some people around campus, trying to figure out what to do with it, what kind of questions they had. And as I was talking to people, they realized they didn't know before this that we had this great data set within Canvas. And so as people learned that we had all this data available, they were all kind of like, I want the data, and I want it meow. So as I was talking to people, I was talking to folks like Alex, who's on my team. Alex is an academic services professional, kind of on the academic tech side. We have a few other folks who are instructional designers, course designers, and developers on our team. There are some folks like that embedded throughout the university. So after talking to them, after kind of listening to the buzz on campus, the buzz in higher ed, about what people are interested in, mobile learning came up really present quite a bit. And we had some questions about whether we had any mobile data about Canvas. And I was like, as a matter of fact, we do. So I started working on this, which is a dashboard in Tableau to start answering the question, how do students engage with content in Canvas? And for us in this context, we're kind of looking at a few different meanings of engagement. The first is, are they using mobile or desktop devices? And when they're doing that, are they participating or consuming? That's kind of that top bar graph. In the lower left, we're looking at how much do students use desktop mobile devices within each content area. So when they're in assignments, when they're on the home page, which type of devices are they using? And then finally, within each of those content areas, are they consuming or participating? So if you hover over the dashboard, you get some of these tooltips that pop up just to get a little bit more information. The visualization is really great because your eye can kind of perceive what's going on really quickly. But if you want the numbers, you hover over, you get these tooltips. So for example, in this course, when participating out of about 1.3 million records, 94% of use was on a desktop device. And so you can kind of maneuver around the dashboard, hover over some things, engage a little bit, get some more of these details. So why did we build this dashboard? We were really hoping that it would inform course and instructional design decisions. We hear a lot about designing for the mobile world. We live in a very mobile world. You look around the conference, everybody's on their phones, everybody's taking pictures of slides. Our students obviously are very engaged in the mobile world, messaging on Facebook, looking up restaurant reviews on Yelp, literally navigating the world with apps on their phone. But we kind of wanted to answer the question, do they actually engage the same way in Canvas as they do in the rest of the world? We hear a lot of talk about it, but we hadn't actually looked at a lot of data, at least at our institution. And so that was the purpose behind this. So we're going to get into a little bit about how I built it, and then we'll talk more about what we're doing with it, and then how you can use some of this stuff and get more involved with this project. Because this, for us, is kind of a first stab at understanding particularly the request table in Canvas data, and a first stab at understanding device usage. There's some other efforts out there. I know there was a great Canvas Live video session earlier this spring, which is really helpful. But we really want this to be a community project, a very collaborative thing. We're by no means saying this is the be-all, end-all definitive understanding. So we've got some links at the end to share the dashboard files with you, to share this Google Doc that we created. Yeah. So one of the first choices that we made, I guess, was what tool are we going to use to explore the data? And when I started a year and a half ago, we had a couple desktop licenses for Tableau already. So I didn't actually make that choice necessarily, but I was really excited about it because I had used Tableau a little bit, and it has a great reputation. And over the year and a half that I've been there, it's been amazing. It's definitely not the only tool out there. You can do the same stuff with some other tools, Microsoft, Power BI, Excel if you need to, Domo, Looker, Click, Periscope. Those are a few other great data visualization tools, but we went with Tableau and we're super happy with it. It's also been really helpful for us as we've kind of picked up steam within the organization. There's some other data things going on. And like I said, we started with just those 2 desktop licenses in our office. And probably within a couple months of starting some of this work, we got a 20-seat Tableau server license, which allowed us to be able to share some of this content with up to 20 people around campus, which isn't a lot of people. And so we quickly outgrew that and bumped it up to 40 seats, and then outgrew that. And then pretty recently, we moved up to an 8-core Tableau server license, which is the minimum server or core server license you can get. But what it allows us to do is share with an unlimited number of people. And we're just kind of limited by the capacity of the server. And so that growth and that ability to share things has been really great within Tableau. As far as the data source, we are using CanvasHosted Data. We're paying for that service, which is where Instructure takes those flat files and puts them into an Amazon Redshift data warehouse and hosts and manages that, which has been super awesome for me because I'm the only data person on the team. And with such a broad set of responsibilities, I don't have time to make Canvas data part of every single day as much as I would love to. So because Instructure is hosting the data warehouse in Amazon Redshift, it means I don't have to deal with the ETL process, the extracting, transforming, and loading. I don't have to deal with any database tuning or database management. It's just all right there. And I can get right into the analysis and visualization pretty quickly. And then as far as this particular project, we're using the requests table and the enrollment dim table from Canvas data. Requests is kind of the meat of it, but we wanted to get down into the course level and then identify or distinguish between TAs, instructors, students, and so that's why we pulled in the enrollment dim table. And it's been great for the most part, except that those of you who've been using hosted data know that, or just using Canvas data in general, know that the request table is huge, and that it doesn't handle sort of careless ad hoc queries very well. And you have to be really delicate and strategic with querying that table. For us, with about 2 years of data in the request table, we have around 2 billion rows in there. 2 billion with a B. Yeah, I'm sure people have like way more. Some people may have as much, I don't know. But for our Redshift instance, it doesn't handle that very well. And so we kind of like, as great as that solution has been for a lot of things, with this particular project, we kind of bumped up to a roadblock, I guess. Because to put together that dashboard with those slides or screenshots that we saw, we had to focus down to one specific course. That was the CU Online Student Success course, which is a course that students can take at the university to help prepare them for online courses. It's totally optional. I think at the time of this, we had maybe a couple hundred in there, or who had taken it. So we couldn't look at everything. We couldn't look at all courses across the university. We really had to narrow down just to that one course to make this work with that Redshift instance. And I wanted to give people like Alex a little bit more flexibility, because Alex and our sort of academic technology, course design, instructional design staff are the ones using this to interact with faculty and help them explore how students engage with their course a little bit. And so it was pretty cumbersome to have to switch courses. So we wanted there to be an option to really just toggle between courses within this dashboard pretty quickly. And so we explored some other options. We landed on a database technology called Exasol. It's EXASOL. Pretty big, it's German-based, pretty big over in Europe right now, not huge here yet, but it's a really memory-heavy, column-oriented analytics database. And so just a couple weeks ago, I loaded the 2 flat files from the request table and the enrollment dim table in there. And it's been pretty cool because now Alex, rather than having to go through a cumbersome process of like requesting a new, like a totally separate dashboard be built for a totally separate course with like just that data in there, we've been able to add a filter, so we can just filter between courses. And when it queries it for the first time, like when it queries a particular course for the first time, it takes maybe a minute or two to load, which is, to go through 2 billion rows in a minute or two, I'm pretty happy with that. We couldn't do that in Redshift at all before. We ran into like a 16 gigabyte limit with how much data we could pull back in memory. So yeah, as far as data source goes, that's kind of what we're doing. I think the last piece is that using the hosted data has been really nice because it's made it easy to collaborate with other people who are also using hosted data. Because in principle, I can just share my workbook file. And if you're using hosted data, you open the workbook, put in your Redshift credentials, and then more or less it pulls in your data. And so I was able to do that. I think one of the Instructure staff had put some stuff up there in Tableau, so I pulled that down and was able to do it. I've put that stuff out there in the community, have engaged with a couple other institutions trying to make some things work. So hosted data has been great for that. And then this was really the crux of this project. Like any good data project, 75–80% is spent actually in the data understanding phase. And so Instructure did a great job with the documentation on the website. Everything is laid out really nicely. It's pretty clear. But it's not fleshed out 100%. And so I didn't have a lot of like web development or software development experience. And so I had to kind of do some learning on my own to understand the request table, because a lot of the fields in the request table are tied to web development and software development. And so did some learning on my own, talked to some folks on our web services team in the IT department to, I guess, just to get myself up to speed to be able to interpret what was going on there a little bit better. And then the biggest piece for us was working with our student employee, who we had this spring for 3 to 4 months, about 15 hours a week. And he and I very tediously worked hard to create 2 Sandbox courses. And then we would each go into the other he was an instructor in one and a student in the other, and then I had swapped roles. And we would go into the Sandbox course, record it using Zoom, so we would capture everything that we were doing, just submit things, post discussions, click on stuff, and then we'd also document it in a spreadsheet. So we had this like spreadsheet with like a list of every single action that we had done, and then we also had it recorded on the screen. We'd wait for a day or two until the data got updated in Redshift, and then we'd be able to go into the Redshift instance and see how what we did showed up. And so that was really helpful for us because we knew exactly what was going on in the course, and then we could kind of compare it to what was actually showing up in the data. So that was really insightful. We have a nice, I don't know how long, like a 15-ish page Google Doc that's very like academic. Yeah, you have a question?
So were you able to follow the individual user in every step that they took inside of Canvas, or did it just give you like an aggregate these items for access?
So the question was, were we able to follow individual users, or was it just in aggregate? Yeah, we were able to follow individual users. So in the request table, every time a user does something, it sends a request to the Canvas server. It's like when you click, that click is sent to the Canvas server, and then the Canvas server has to decide what to do with that. And so, yeah, we can see everything, and there's a user ID that's a field in the request table. Yeah.
So 2 questions. What's the size of your university? And then the second was, what did you spend total at this point on the data warehousing, all the Tableau, everything?
Yeah.
Including your salary?
My salary is the lowest thing we spent. So, so the question is the size of the university. I think we have, if you look on our website, it says we have about 18,000 students between the downtown campus and the Anschutz Medical Campus. That's full-time equivalents. So I think any given semester we have in the ballpark of like 25-ish, maybe 30,000. Okay. Yeah. And I don't know how much money we spent. Sorry. No, I really don't. I know. Yeah, let me think about that, and I'll do some math in my head, and we can connect at the end. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So anyhow, we did all this data understanding. We put it in a Google Doc. We published it to the Canvas community. There's a link at the end. Please go take a look, comment, critique. That'd be great. So once we worked through this data understanding piece, what did we do? This was when we actually got to start building stuff. So this is in Tableau. This is one of the group tools. And so to kind of answer that question about when students are participating versus consuming and what devices are they using, the first thing we had to do was come up with these categories, participating and consuming. And then other is stuff we didn't know what to do with. So like I was saying, every time a user in Canvas clicks something, it sends an HTTP request to Canvas. And then within that Canvas application, there are some different things going on. There's a controller that makes a decision, or I guess it gets decided which controller is going to handle that request. And so when you click something, say you click the assignments link, that request is sent to Canvas. Canvas is like, okay, we're going to run that through the assignments controller. There's also discussions, quizzes, home, things like that. There are these different like boxes that handle that. And then once you get, not like a literal box, but figurative, architecturally. And then once that request gets filtered into that controller then takes an action. You know, are we going to show something? Are we going to update something? Are we going to delete something? And so to start categorizing these fields, we looked at the web application action field primarily for this. And so we just, again, this is in Tableau, this is that group functionality. We're creating a new field that'll look at each row of data, and then it'll look at that web application action field, and for each value, it'll say, okay, let me get here. You can see we've got these three groups. If I expand them, it goes to that row of data and says, okay, if the value for web application action is add entry, then we're going to put that into the participating category. If the value is add reply, we'll put that into participating also. If the value is backup, we'll put that into consuming. And so just some logic, grouping those values into these different areas was how we were able to start getting at participating and consuming. And again, this is based on what we were seeing in our Sandbox courses. And so we could kind of roughly gauge, okay, when we see a value that's add reply, we know that we did this in the course, and that corresponds to something that we would think of as participating versus just like consuming or reading content. The next thing we wanted to do was really categorize these content areas. Again, this is a calculated field in Tableau. And Canvas data is great, but it's real, and it's really messy, and it's complex. To sort of add to the complexity, Canvas uses its own API for a lot of stuff. And so often you'll click on assignments, for example, and it doesn't just create one row of data in the request table, it creates multiple rows of data. There are redirects, there's use of the API. And so we were really trying to weed out a lot of that noise and identify what was really of value in that table. And so to do that, we started looking at several different fields. And we just used a fairly basic if statement. And so what we're doing is we're saying, for this row of data, look at the web application controller field. And if the value is courses, and if you look at the web application action field and the value is show, if you look at HTTP status and it's 200, you look at HTTP method and it's get, and you look at the URL and it does not contain API, or these other set of criteria are met, then put this into the home category. And then the rest of that is if those first set of conditions aren't met, see if these conditions are met. If they are, put it into the announcements category. If they're not, keep going through. And so this is just a calculated field in Tableau, and that's how we were able to group these different records in the request table into content areas. And then to get at that mobile piece, we did the same thing. We have another calculated field in Tableau. We're using the user agent field from the request table. And it's worth noting, and probably very important to note, that the user agent field is a bit nebulous. It's this piece of information that your browser or your mobile app sends to the Canvas server with information like your browser type, browser version, operating system, things like that. And so it sounds like it's this great way to get all this information about what type of browser, what operating system, device, et cetera, that the user is using. But the browser or mobile app can actually put whatever they want into the user agent field. And so I think it's better than unreliable, but it's not 100% perfect. And so this is an area where we would love more like community feedback. If you have a better way to get at this, there's some more established methods out there for sure. But what we did was basically just say, go look at the user agent field. If you see this set of text in there, if you see iPad in there, we're going to call that mobile. If you see iPhone, we'll call that mobile, so on and so forth. And so that's how we got to categorizing between mobile and desktop. I guess it's worth noting that like we didn't deal with tab. We did mobile, desktop. I see a lot of stuff out there. There's like mobile, tablet, desktop. We were just like whatever, mobile, desktop. And then unknown is stuff that we just didn't know what to do because we probably got, I feel like several hundred, if not into the thousands, of unique user agent values. And there's all kinds of crazy stuff out there. So. And then lastly, we wanted to communicate some of these decisions and data definitions to our end users, like people like Alex. So when he's working with a faculty member, and he's like, oh, how did we categorize participating and consuming again? He can just hover over that question mark in the top left, and this tooltip will pop up with some of that data definition information, or whatever I want to put in there.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome. Waiting for folks to take pictures. Yeah, I'll answer your question while the pictures are.
How often do you offload that data over to your other databases? Once daily or once a week?
That's a good question. How often do we offload data into our other database, that XSL instance? We've only done it once so far. We have a lot, like XSL came up because we have some other things going on at the university too related to data warehousing. And so this was a really good opportunity to kind of like test some stuff and bring in Canvas data. So we haven't set up a like regularly scheduled import, but I think we probably will. I don't know. I would say daily-ish, just because that's the most we can get from Canvas. Canvas data, I believe, is updated. At least last I checked, was updated daily. I know they've talked before about trying to get a slightly faster cadence, but I think daily is good enough for the most part. Yeah, and then the last thing, caveats and learnings. In terms of how we built it, obviously we'd love to explore a better way to do user. Maybe user agent is good enough, but it'd be nice to know for sure. And then we saw some interesting things show up with content areas as we were categorizing things, like with files, for example. In those screenshots that we saw, files ended up being the content area that looks like it's the most highly trafficked. And we found that really interesting because in this course, there weren't actually any files that were like relevant content. Students weren't having to download PDFs to read, or there were no diagrams embedded in pages that were curriculum related. There was a lot of decorative stuff in there. And so we kind of figured out that every time you go to a page, if there's also a file on there, like you get a request for a file also. And so that just kind of, I think the takeaway from that is being really aware of the context when you're looking at this and knowing, like, does this make sense? Is this valuable? What does this mean? If you're looking at that, like me having no idea about the course, I may be like, oh, wow, like people are loving files in this course. They must have a bunch of stuff. But it turns out that, the instructor is like, oh, no, there's nothing there. So just being aware of that context is really important. And with that, that's kind of how we built it. And now we're going to get more into what we're doing with it and how you can get engaged.
Cool. Thanks, Brenden. Yeah, so I'm not here just for moral support. I'm actually going to say a couple things. But if you remember way back at the beginning, my name's Alex Karklins. And if you are thinking about getting a data manager for your university, I highly recommend it. Brenden has done a lot of good things, not just with the Canvas data. He's actually working on a lot of other things and building a business intelligence kind of infrastructure at the university, taking data from a lot of different sources. But since we got access to Canvas data, Brenden hasn't just built this dashboard. He's built a couple other ones that are just more informative as far as like showing how often and when students are accessing Canvas. So we are within the IT department at our university. And our IT department likes to really work on a 9 to 5 kind of schedule, you know? So we're gonna push out updates like at 7 p.m. on a Friday. Well, that doesn't necessarily work for our fully online students. That's when they're first logging in. So if they want to do a network upgrade that takes down our authentication, students can't log into Canvas. Hey, maybe we should probably move that to like more like 2 a.m., which makes them really happy. But that's, so we've had some dashboards that basically show over time, you know, when students are logging in, what kind of web, you know, what kind of web traffic is coming into Canvas. That's been helpful when having discussions with IT when you know they're going over upgrades. He also built another dashboard that shows what time of day students are submitting assignments. I think this was like kind of an example that had been put out in the community before, but we wanted to apply it to our own, and that's kind of interesting. Don't know really what we're going to do with that, but it's very kind of enlightening to see when students are actually, you know, submitting the most assignments. Maybe that's something we can bring out to like our faculty and say, hey, maybe don't make everything due on that Sunday night at 11:59, because that's when everybody's submitting assignments. Maybe like space it out over the week or something like that. But it's pretty cool. But we'll go back in here and we'll focus on the current dashboard that we've been working on. And a lot of this was inspired by our colleague Kate Miller, who's here in the audience. Started this with a simple question, or we thought was a simple question. Do we have any numbers on how many students are actually using mobile devices in Canvas? When in the course of kind of like preparing this, I was doing a little web search on mobile design for learning and came across this quote, which I found really, really amusing, because there is no doubt that that is true, but that really doesn't mean a whole lot of a whole lot without some data behind it. It's, you know, you'll see in every EdTech conference, there are sessions on mobile learning, mobile devices. You know, mobile learning is exploding. It's getting, you know, it's getting more and more popular. There are like 6 other sessions here at InstructureCon all about mobile learning and stuff like that and its implications. But a lot of the data that we get from all these sessions is, a lot of times it's mostly kind of like survey type data, you know, self-reporting, like, would you like to use the mobile app more? How many times in the last week have you used the mobile app to do this? I'd like to actually get some hard data and see how, you know, at our university, at CU Denver and the Anschutz Medical Campus, how often is it actually getting used? And I'll just reveal the source here. This was like a content mill that basically ended up on the first page of the Google search, because it's basically aggregating a lot of the kind of common knowledge out there, but there's no real data behind this. This was like kind of a, you know, wasn't a very good article, but I thought that quote was really amusing because that's the sentiment that we have out there. It has captured the mobile learning has caught the imagination of learning developers worldwide. That's totally true, but why? And should it? So I'm going to show a little bit about what we're doing with the dashboards here. So we'll break down some of these areas of the dashboard. So this is showing how students interact with different content types. So you basically have, with this one course that I took this out of, this was an actual course. This wasn't just the student success course. This was a live course that was taught in the spring. It was a science course, a general ed course, taught by an instructor who's technically savvy. Their course is mostly mobile friendly. But you'll see, you can be able to see, you know, what percentage of these content areas are participating versus consuming content. We think that makes a difference, because if you're presenting something as, you know, to consume, that's kind of more like the mobile web experience. You know, you're going in, you're consuming thing, you're doing a little bit of interaction, maybe, but the participation is kind of secondary in this schema right here. So when we're thinking about maybe designing for mobile, we maybe want to consider more on the consuming side of things, like content pages, announcements, things like that, as opposed to going into like assignments or quizzing, maybe. we still haven't really made the determination on that. So we can also see what percentage of content is being accessed by a mobile device. So it kind of says, see what percentage of students use the mobile features. That's maybe not entirely accurate, but you'll see that in this course, it's about 20% of consuming is done on a mobile device. Participating is a tiny sliver of that. So I thought that was kind of interesting to see that. So we can see what percentage, and then obviously having this as a percentage is a lot more informative than just looking at the individual requests, because those raw numbers are really big. You don't really know how to deal with that. You can say, oh yeah, it's millions and millions of, of requests, but it's not, that doesn't give you the full picture. And so what else we can do is we can prioritize content to revise for mobility, if that's a case. So you see on this one, we see how much students are using desktop, mobile, or unknown devices. I'm sure Brenden can go more into the unknown category. I think you touched on it already, but
yeah, it's just stuff that we don't know.
Yeah, it's unknown. Yeah, it is what it says on the tin. So
we didn't know how to categorize.
So maybe don't ask. But then we can see as a percentage, which areas should we prioritize for redesign when we talk to faculty. The faculty that we work with, we're mostly at a research institution. We don't have the academic authority to say you have to do this with your course, with your online courses, but we can point them in the right direction. So this is a good tool to say, hey, more students are, let's say, doing discussions on their mobile devices. Make sure your prompts are mobile friendly. They don't have a lot of content in there that's gonna mess with their experience. So it's prioritizing that. And so the other thing is exploring trends over time. And I found this really, really interesting. This is essentially the same class. The class that was taught in fall 2015 was a face-to-face class. The one in fall 2016 was an online class. So there's the main difference in there, but it's pretty much the same content, same instructor, same structure of the course. There was nothing, nothing. There were a couple maybe like, more recorded lectures and things like that, but the structure was very much the same. But you'll see in the fall of 2015, there were 32% viewing on the mobile device, which is, I think, a pretty good percentage. But a year later, in the fully online version, it dropped way down to 20%, which is pretty counterintuitive because you hear about the upward trajectory of mobile learning over time. What explains that? That's kind of weird, if you think about it. So, and I think that will make a really interesting study. So the next time, now that we have the tools to basically pull up all this data from individual courses, we can study the effects of mobile design over time on the same class. Go through and say, hey, does this really make a difference? Does prioritizing designing for mobile actually encourage mobile usage? And we'll have the data to back it up instead of anecdotal evidence or survey data or anything like that. You can explore the chicken and the egg question. Does mobile, which came first, mobile design or mobile learning? It's kind of interesting to see those effects because now we can go in and we can grab that data from individual courses, compare and contrast them. And we can deploy this tool to our instructional designers when working with faculty. We can have this tool, we can plug in the course ID into the dashboard and come up with that data within a minute or so. And then sit down and say, hey, look, this is how your students are engaging with your content. And you might want to prioritize redoing this content area, these announcements, these discussions before the others. Getting close to 5 minutes here, so I'll wrap this up. And what's coming next is we're going to enhance that dashboard that you just saw. Since we moved to the XSL, we have the ability to pull in all those rows really quick, and we can have more of a top-down institutional view. We'll be able to compare the course that we're looking at with all other courses in the university going forward. And so I think that's pretty exciting. But then we also really want to reach out to the community, the Canvas community, other people who are struggling with Canvas data in general. and getting your feedback. So Brendan's very active in the community here. We've got a short link here to his discussion in the Canvas community using Canvas data with Tableau. And so if you're kind of in the similar boat to us or thinking about getting into that boat, realizing that it's a lot of work, but he's already done a lot of legwork here, go ahead and join this community here, or just view this page, comment on it. We have a bunch of workbooks on there already. So if you are using Redshift data, you can access those workbooks, plug in your credentials, and use what Brenden has already created in here. So if you see, it's https://goo.gl/s, big W, little d, big X, little m, 9. And reach out to us, because we'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to know if we've gone completely off the rails with our data understanding too. I think it's pretty accurate. Brenden is very thorough. If you saw him like building out this presentation, he was very particular about that. So go ahead and open it up for questions. I think you had.
So you guys mentioned the dashboard several times. Is this a dashboard for you to be able to mine the data? Is this a dashboard for like administrators or professors to log in?
The question was, who is this dashboard for? It's basically for me, my team, but we can share it out to like administrators or whoever else, because the dashboard is accessible on a public, not on a public site, on a university site.
Yeah, at the moment we haven't quite got to the point at the university where we can open it up a little bit more for any faculty to log in and see their course specifically. And so right now it's just our team of a few instructional designers, academic tech folks, who can go through and look at whatever course they need to while they're meeting with faculty.
You guys talked about working with your instructional designers. Have you guys done any like longitudinal kind of things, like looking over several courses and if you change something, how that affects something outputs or anything?
Okay, the question was have we done any longitudinal studies with instructors over a time period? No, and that's actually why we kind of just recently really rolled this out. Yeah. We're going to probably get a lot of data on that going forward when we work with instructors, because now we actually have the tools to do that.
We'll get here and then back and then the corner. Yeah.
Do you measure student engagement maybe with video? Do you know the analytics coming up from that?
So somebody correct, like if you've done this and have a different response, let me know. But the little bit that I've explored with video in Canvas is that like it's not captured in Canvas data, because it's usually like YouTube videos that are being embedded. So you've got to go to the YouTube account, or maybe it's some other like LTI that you're using. And so the data is actually with that LTI or that external tool rather than within Canvas data. So we haven't yet, but if I could do this all day, every day, and only this, I would love to.
Yeah, and I think that's a good future direction too, like engaging with different tools in Canvas, getting some metrics on that. We did recently roll out TechSmith Relay as well, so we're going to get analytics from those videos. When students watch those, they actually track that kind of stuff. Maybe there's a way we can roll those things together.
Yeah. Good. Back there. I'll get you after third. Yeah.
So when you and your student worker were mapping things out,
yeah.
testing something in the sandbox, are you only using desktop or are you using mobile?
Oh, good question. We only use desktop. Yeah, the question was when Omer, our student employee, and I were kind of doing our like evaluation where we had our Sandbox courses, do we only use desktop or do we only do mobile? I only did desktop. There's a chance that Omer was great, and so he had a lot of autonomy, and so I don't know. He might have used mobile. I didn't.
The reason I ask is my understanding is that Canvas request doesn't pick up the same information for mobile as it does for desktop. And so the reason you might be seeing more consuming than you participating is because it's not getting those page requests, such as HTTP requests on mobile, that it's getting in desktop. So something to look into.
Yeah, so the comment was that there's an understanding that maybe Canvas doesn't pick up mobile requests the same way that it does desktop requests, and that's something to look into. Let's back corner and then over there. Yeah.
So that's actually my second point.
Okay.
So I have on device, you can access Canvas or you can use a Canvas mobile app.
Yeah.
My understanding as well is the mobile app doesn't quite sync data back.
Yeah, so it sends some. I don't know, like if you look at the user agent, there are definitely some fields in there. Oh, sorry, that's right. It's just kind of a piggyback off of the earlier comments about some of the different ways that the mobile app versus desktop devices send information to the Canvas web server. And yeah, it's something that needs to be explored more. I know like there is mobile app data in the request table. There's not mobile app. I don't think there's mobile app data in course analytics if you're just doing that within a course shell. But yeah, it's like, yeah, I would love your thoughts and feedback on that. Find me after or go to the community and make comments. That'd be great. Was there a question over here? Yeah.
Did you look at unique mobile users?
Unique mobile users? No, we did not look at unique mobile users. More good ideas there.
Yeah, thanks for all that. And
so I'm coming back to the money question. So a desktop license for Tableau is, I think, around $1,200 upfront plus $300 maintenance a year per seat. They are shifting. They've shifted to like a subscription package thing, and we're on the old one, so I don't know how the subscription stuff changes, but there's that. So you've got that. Tableau server, we spent, I think, for the 20-seat license in the low hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, it's pretty expensive. Low hundred, like 100 to a few $100,000 just for the Tableau server, which is just to share things with people.
Internally, like in your college?
Yeah, there's some functionality that allow you to have people outside of the college if you want. Hit it, but the way we've set it up right now, yeah, it's just in our firewall. You got to be on campus or on the VPN.
What you said, just having the Tableau license isn't really enough to pull off what you want to do.
Pull off what we want to do.
I mean, in general, like if you were to advise a college to move forward with creating data infrastructure,
Yeah.
you need to have a bigger plan than just buying Tableau.
I think so, yeah. I mean, Tableau is just the sort of the visualization side of it. The question was, if I were to advise a college or a university or some institution about what to do you need more than Tableau? Yeah. There's the data warehousing side too, which was pretty significant for us. Paying for CanvasHosted Data was really helpful in getting started and like jumping right into the analysis and visualization.
CanvasHosted Data, so it's different
Yeah.
than the Canvas Data portal.
Right, so Canvas Data is free. Like you can go get the flat files totally for, I think it's free at least. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, you've got to write your own APIs. There's the CLI, the command line interface.
Yeah, they got a new tool.
Okay.
They got a new tool, just rolled out.
So there's a lot of support. There's a PyData, or that's not PyData, it's Canvas API is what it's called now. Just a session before this, which was some Python packages, or a Python package to make it easier to get that data. Canvas has stuff. There's some good stuff in the community. So like you can get the data for free from Canvas, but then you have to do all that ETL, like the extracting, transforming. There's not a lot of transforming. So just like you've got to pull it into your own data warehouse and then host. It can be. It sounds like some people have worked through a lot and shared it with the community. But yeah.
Can we take one more question, or?
Yeah, over here.
Okay.
If you had a dedicated resource, would you just deal with the data that you get into your own data warehouse daily and then forego the hosting cost? Or would you still have that in both kinds of?
So the question is, if we had a dedicated resource, would we have our own data warehouse versus paying for hosted data?
Paying to have it hosted in Redshift, or just grab it every day and have your person do all your stuff?
I think it depends what you want to do. I think hosted data is great because I don't have to worry about anything and I can just query, analyze. The one place where we really ran into an obstacle was with the request table, just because it's so big. When I started, I'd reached out, Instructure is great, I'd reached out to Instructure to see if we could up our, or add more nodes to our Redshift instance, because we kind of have like the lowest thing, and they said that it wasn't something they would consider at the time, which was over a year ago now. I don't know if things have changed. I mean, you can get more nodes and more power in Redshift on your own without like if you weren't going through. The Redshift stuff's read only, and so we can just query it, and we're not managing it all, which is nice for some things, trouble for other things. So yeah, to answer the question, I think it just depends. Outside of the request table, our data set is pretty small, and so the Redshift stuff is totally fine.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for attending. I really appreciate you showing up for this.